Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to my 10 favorite AC/DC albums. So, AC/DC has certainly made an indelible stamp on the world, music, pop culture, just everything. They've really been a part of it for the last 50 years. Huge albums, big sales, sellout tours. All the names of the members are synonymous. You know them inside and out. But before they were part of AC/DC, some of these guys had other bands, and some of those bands made some really great albums, and those are the albums I want to talk to you guys about. So stick around as I run through 10 of my favorite AC/DC related albums. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask you guys to comment, like, subscribe, do all those things for the channel. It really helps out. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, if you turn on notifications, you'll never miss an episode, and stay up to date on cool things like this right here where we're talking about favorite AC/DC related albums. So let's go ahead and dive into it here. No particular order for real, except that I thought this one here was a really good place to start. I'm going to show you the vinyl version of it. Got a CD one too, and I'm talking about AC/DC frontman Brian Johnson's one and only solo album, Strange Man, from 1982. Now, the thing is, it's only technically a solo album because prior to him joining AC/DC, he was in a group called Geordie, who made 4 studio albums. These 4 that are right there. And that was between 1972 and 1978. And those are actually some really good albums. This is out on the 70s label, and I would highly recommend this box set. In particular, some, not all, of these tracks here actually appear on this disc here, Brian Johnson and Geordie. But let me talk about what this is. So the fact that he was part of that group, they took those songs and remixed them for the 1982 sound and put out this album here. So really, it's like a Geordie compilation that was modernized for the 80s, but recorded between 72 and 1978. So kind of a cool concept to it. We have artists doing that kind of stuff today, but they were doing it back then as well. ZZ Top did the same thing. They took their back catalog, modernized it for the 80s. And being a child of the 80s, I really like this. And if you like 80s style music, I think you're also going to really like it. But for me, it's got that Brian Johnson sound to it. And if you want more of that sort of stuff, I think this is a great album. It didn't really go over that big, but then it wasn't promoted by Brian Johnson. It wasn't promoted by his label as a thing. It was sort of a cash grab to tie into his success with AC/DC. And as part of that success, the band Geordie itself decided to get back together and release this one called No Sweat from 1983. And so this one here does not have an AC/DC member in it. It's only tied in by name, and the fact that it was the backing band or whatever, it was Brian Johnson's band before he joined AC/DC. But I love this album. It's actually out on the Neat Records label, which was, I guess I can see it in there, the new wave of British heavy metal. So these guys were classified in that, but as I said, they started in 1972, went up to 1978, and then broke up and then got back together for this in 82. And I happen to think this sounds really great. Again, if you like the other Geordie stuff, you're going to like this. If you like new wave of British heavy metal, you're also going to like that album. But I wouldn't call it new wave of British heavy metal because the band came before that. They really were not part of it. Maybe they helped inspire it, but they really weren't part of it. But the Neat label, that's what they were all about, and so they put that out. So in all, we got the Brian Johnson solo album here, and there's a number of versions of these. So that's what I was going to talk about with this version that's in here. Let me pull it out, in fact, so you can see. In fact, I'll go ahead and just show you all of the discs that are in this thing. So you get each one of these albums individually in here, but it's this one here that is the Brian Johnson with Geordie. And it's actually got a different track listing than his Strange Man album. So there's a number of different versions floating around. I don't know how many songs they remixed and all, because I've got another CD out there that's called, I think it's called Rockin' or something like that. And it's got different track listing than these two. So number of different versions out there, but all in all, very cool stuff and definitely worth checking out. Okay, once more, twice removed this time. So we were talking about Geordie, which has Brian Johnson, right? But then Geordie go off and do their own thing. When this didn't take off, the band continued under the name Powerhouse. Now this is new wave of British heavy metal at its best. I mean, just look at that album cover there. Very, very cool. I've also got the vinyl version of this. Just another awesome, there's the guys right there. So they continued on with three of the guys from Geordie, but got new guitar player in there. So this is minus Vic Malcolm and David Stephenson. Those were the two guitar players from Geordie, and in comes Martin Metcalf to take over. But you still got the same, the other guys that are in the group. You still got the bassist, you still got the drummer that's in there, you still got the vocalist. So all very cool stuff continuing on. I loved this album so much that when I found out there was really a second album, I was very excited about it. Now, this stuff is getting away from the AC/DC sound, right? But still having the connection in there. Let's get back over to actually having AC/DC connection number one, but having somebody in the group. And so I want to talk to you guys about Buster Brown. Don't know if you know who this group is. Something to Say. One and only album from 1974. So debut, that's it, one and done. One of those killer bands. In fact, I probably got to get this part of one of my one-hit wonder episodes that I've been doing, putting those kind of things together, because those albums are so much fun. But Buster Brown formed in 1973, same year as AC/DC. And unfortunately, though, disbands in 1975. Of course, their claim to fame, though, two members that would go on to much bigger things. First and foremost, the person that ties into AC/DC, Phil Rudd, the drummer, who of course would go on to join AC/DC and do 3 stints with the band. So 1975 to 83, he was part of the group. 1994 to 2015, and he returned in 2018, and he's still presently there. But the other person, not to be overshadowed by Phil Rudd, we're talking about AC/DC, but if you love the vocals of Bon Scott and Brian Johnson, then you know Angry Anderson, and he is the front man of this group. So Phil Rudd, Angry Anderson together in one album. This one here is one of the best ones, and if you love Rose Tattoo, this is worth checking out. So definitely Something to Say. 1974 is the name of the album. Check this out as a killer one-hit wonder that's related to AC/DC. All right, moving on. We're going to stay with the theme of having someone in the group. And I'm going to talk to you guys now about the group Starfighters. And so they were also part of the new wave of British heavy metal movement, featuring Stevie Young in the lineup. And he's the nephew to Malcolm and Angus. So he is in this group here. But of course, we all now know that he has since taken over for Malcolm Young in AC/DC, and he's now the rhythm guitar player in the group. So whereas this was just kind of a cool curiosity back in the 80s, and once again, I've got vinyl versions of these, and they made a second album too. So we got the self-titled in 1981, and then we've got this one here called In Flight Movie, works really well with the name of the band, 1983. And so these are very hard to come by, both of these copies, and CDs are even harder. A lot of these things have been reissued through Wounded Bird. I don't know if any of them made it to Rock Candy, but lots of labels have grabbed these things up, so there are ones floating around. I don't think this actual version has ever been made to CD. And of course, I say that because I actually made this. This is my own copy, photocopied out version to create that, because you know me, I love my CDs. But of course, I did it off of this here, so you can look at that and see that I just simply photocopied to create it. But anyways, I would love for this actual version, track listing, remastering, and everything, or remix and all of that sort of stuff to happen, but I don't know that it ever will. But Stevie Young, Starfighters. So Again, it's along the lines of new wave of British heavy metal, 1980s hard rock style music, a little removed from what AC/DC is. In fact, I wasn't quite sure what Stevie would bring to the formula of AC/DC, knowing what he did here, but he has done it in fine fashion. I think those last two albums that he's played on have been pretty good stuff in there. And I know, of course, it's built off of Malcolm's riffs, but he's doing a great job up there, and certainly enjoying it and loving the fact that we've got something like this to pull from, whether we're going back to, Starfighters here, or the in-flight movie, this album here, but that's always a cool thing right there. This next one here, we're going to go a little bit out on a limb. It's a little bit of a stretch here, but it's a cool one. It's a curiosity type thing. So, band called Backstreet Crawler, formed in 1975 by former Free guitarist Paul Kossoff. So there's a cool tie-in there, aside from AC/DC. If you like the band Free, you like good blues hard rock, Backstreet Crawler is for you. Okay, but when Bon Scott passed away and they were auditioning singers, yeah, they auditioned Brian Johnson, but who else did they audition? Terry Slesher from this group, right? So I've always wanted to know, what would AC/DC have sounded like if Brian Johnson hadn't sung with them? Give Backstreet Crawler a listen. And so, like I said, very, very cool stuff, certainly for fans of Free, Paul Kossoff, stuff like that, but it's got that cool hard rock vibe to it as well, or blues rock vibe, I should really say. And they did two albums. So here's the self-titled. The band plays on from 75 and then 2nd Street in 1976. So they only made the two with Paul Kossoff. However, when he left and or passed away, because I don't know the whole history of all of that, I know he's not alive today, but the band changed its name to Crawler. And they made two more albums. So this is 1977, and I don't have the last one, which is Snake, Rattle, and Roll from 1978. But you got 4 albums there from Backstreet Crawler that have Terry Slesher singing on it, and he almost was. It was down between Brian Johnson and him, and they went with Brian Johnson, and I'm glad that they did. But the what ifs, right? What if they had gone with this guy? What would AC/DC have sound like? So I always enjoy going back and pulling these out and giving them a listen. All right, now let's jump back in. We're going to wrap this up with one more that does have somebody in it from AC/DC, the Chris Slade Timeline, Timescape from 2024. This just came out. I was so glad to see something like this, to get something to add this into the AC/DC collection. So, of course, featuring former AC/DC drummer Chris Slade. And he had 2 stints with the band, 1989 to 1994, which was the era that I came into AC/DC. It was the Razor's Edge, Thunderstruck, great album that it was. And then he returned in 2015 to 16, replacing Paul Rudd when he had to step away or was booted aside for a bit due to some legal wranglings that he was dealing with. But Chris Slade made a name for himself outside of AC/DC long before he ever joined AC/DC. He was part of Uriah Heep, The Firm, Asia, Michael Schenker Group, Gary Moore, Manfred Mann's Earth Band. And so that's what this is here. This is a double album that not only has new songs, but re-recorded songs from his time in those other bands, but it's with this current lineup, playing it, making it all sound like one thing. And so not only do we get Thunderstruck on here, of course, we also get a version of the Razor's Edge, which I think is a way underrated AC/DC tune. But better than that, you get the song Big Gun, which is from Last Action Hero. So you get some cool AC/DC tunes, and you get other stuff on here too. Blinded by the Light, which is Manfred Mann's song on here, and some other different ones like Free, which is an Asia tune. So all very cool stuff on here. 2 CD set, like I said, new material and re-recordings of stuff, all in that same vein. So all together there, 10, and if you count the one album I didn't have from Crawler, you actually got 11 recommended albums for you guys that are my favorite AC/DC related albums. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video and maybe found something new within this that you want to go out and explore, because all of this is just good, bluesy, hard rock music like AC/DC. In that vein, if you like that sort of stuff, you want to pump your fist in the air, these are great albums and bands to go explore for that. But who else would you think of, would you like to add to the list that is an AC/DC related band in one way or the other? Leave your comments below and let's have a great conversation about all that. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.